Hey, buddy.
Hi, how can I help you?
I am a big fan of you, Tom Kenny.
Hi, that's really nice to hear. I'm very happy to hear things like this. Thank you.
Do you have a favorite SpongeBob moment?
There's so much moments from this show I love, but I think the episode with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy was one of the funniest things I worked on. I still love it.
Who come up with the idea of a sail mouth?
Well, it's credit of Steven Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob. He has made this show absolutely amazing and original. I'll never forget my first days of working.
Why does SpongeBob never quit his job at the Krusty Krab?
Because he is very optimistic and always sees the positive in everything, so he doesn't think about quitting this job. He loves working at Krusty Krab.
What's your favorite thing to do?
Well, you know, I've been doing many amazing things for work, but I also have my interests. I love to travel, I absolutely adore my family, and I love video games, of course.
What video games do you like to play?
Well, I love all kinds of games, but my favorite ones are platformers. They are really entertaining, and I love classic game consoles. Nintendo 64 is one of the best, really.
How can you do that SpongeBob voice?
It was hard at the beginning, but I've got used to it. To get a specific way of speaking with slightly nasal tone and a few special tricks. Took time and practice.
What was the hardest scene on SpongeBob? You did.
Well, there was a scene in the episode Squid on Strike when SpongeBob and Squidward were playing Sweet Victory. It was really hard for me to hit all those notes in correct speed and pitch in the same time. A total nightmare.
Do you have a favorite moment with Spud, Patrick?
That's a good one. I think my favorite moment with him was a scene in the episode The Paper. Patrick was telling a really terrible joke for 3 minutes straight, and it was actually hilarious. Also, it was hard to hold back laughter and not laugh while being next to him.
Do you remember the episode Secret Box?
Oh yeah, of course I do! It was a very interesting moment when SpongeBob and Patrick were just looking at the box and trying to figure out what's inside. My favorite scene from that episode was the ending where they found out that the box was empty.
Do you remember you and Patrick was inside this box and Squidward kicked it and you all make a bunch of noises to activate him? You say you.
Ah, yes, that was awesome. We really had fun with this scene. This whole episode was full of really funny moments, but the box scene was one of the best. We both made a lot of hilarious noises to activate Squidward.
You said you use your imagination.
Ha, that's right. SpongeBob and his ability to use his imagination is a central part of the show, which makes it unique and entertaining. It's always interesting to see what new idea he will come up with, especially since anything is possible with his wild imagination.
Do you remember this episode when you work with Plankton? Chamburgut?
He thinks for a second. Yeah, I think I did. It was quite a funny episode. Actually, working with Plankton and Mr. Crab in that episode was one of my favorite moments because it's always interesting to see how their weird personalities interact with each other.
What is your favorite Plankton moment?
Well, there are a few, but I think my favorite Plankton moment was the time when he was trying to get the formula from Krabby Patty, but ended up getting stuck to SpongeBob. That whole scene was hilarious.
What is your favorite moment with your girlfriend?
Oh, I have a lot of lovely moments with my girlfriend, but if I had to choose one, it would be the time when we went on a romantic vacation to Hawaii. We just spent 2 weeks together enjoying each other's company and the beautiful scenery. It was really nice.
How did you meet her?
Well, it's actually quite a funny story. We first met on a acting audition about 25 years ago. We didn't talk much at first, but when we had to do some scenes together, we immediately hit it off. We realized that we had great chemistry, and that's how our friendship turned into a relationship.
Do you guys have any kids?
Yes, we do. We have 2 beautiful children, Mac and Nora. They definitely inherited some of our talents, especially the ability to make funny voices.
What was your action? You saw the ad of the 25th anniversary on Wendy's and SpongeBob.
Oh, that was a really special event. I remember when I saw that ad for the first time on Wendy's and SpongeBob 25th anniversary. It was amazing seeing the success and impact that the show has had for so many years. I felt so proud to be part of it, and it was such an honor to work with such creative and talented people.
Do you have any pets?
Yes, actually, we do have a pet. We have a small dog named Peanut. He's a part of our family, and we love him very much.
What kind of dog is it?
He's a small terrier mix, so a mutt, you could say. He's a really cute dog, very friendly and playful. He loves running around, especially playing fetch, and he's always up for a cuddle.
Do you think there will be more SpongeBob episodes in the near future, or no?
Well, I think there will definitely be more SpongeBob episodes in the future, but the exact number is hard to say. There are always talks and plans for new seasons and episodes, but the main focus right now is on the development of the SpongeBob movie, so we'll see what happens.
What episode of SpongeBob do you hate?
A wrinkle between his brows. It's hard to say hate because I've enjoyed the process and I have a good memory about every single episode. But if I had to choose one, I think the episode that I least like is The Great Snail Race. It was just a little too crazy for me.
Is that your most hated episode?
Yeah, I think it is. It was just a bit too over the top for my taste. The whole race thing with the snails felt a bit forced and the jokes didn't quite land for me. But hey, everyone's got their own opinions, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's what makes entertainment fun, isn't it? The fact that we all have different tastes and opinions. It keeps things interesting.
I have a question. What if you make a SpongeBob horror game? Would you do it?
Now that's quite an unexpected question. A SpongeBob horror game, huh? Well, that would certainly be a unique take on the happy-go-lucky sea sponge. I must admit, I've never considered the idea before, but I think it could actually be really fun and interesting.
So what's the gameplay be about?
Well, if we're talking about a SpongeBob horror game, it would definitely need to have some kind of twisted version of the classic SpongeBob universe. I'm picturing a dark, eerie version of Bikini Bottom filled with creepy and disturbing elements. As for the gameplay, it could be something like an exploration game where the player has to solve puzzles and avoid dangerous creatures while trying to escape from the horrors of the deep.
What's the hardest SpongeBob voice you did on SpongeBob episodes?
Oh, there are a few, to be honest. But if I had to pick one, I'd say the hardest SpongeBob voice for me personally was in the episode The Algae's Always Greener. It's the scene where SpongeBob's trying to act all fancy and sophisticated, and I had to nail that really exaggerated posh tone. It was quite a challenge, but a fun one.
What joke you wish to add on SpongeBob?
Well, there are so many jokes we've already made on SpongeBob, but if I had to add one more, I'd say maybe something involving a funny pun or a visual gag. Those kinds of humorous elements are always so entertaining and they fit the show's tone perfectly.
What's your honest opinion about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight? What's your thoughts about it?
Oh boy, I'm not a big fan of influencers trying their hand at boxing, especially against people like Mike Tyson. That fight was more like publicity stunt than a real sporting event. Besides, I'm not sure how the outcome could have been any different. When you put an inexperienced fighter against a boxing legend like Tyson, it's pretty clear how it's gonna end.
That think that match was stupid.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a joke. I mean, what was the point of that match anyway? It's not like Jake Paul had much of a chance against Mike Tyson. It was just a way for them to gain some publicity and make money off of it.
Do you want anything to your fans?
Of course. I just want to say that I'm so grateful for all the love and support I've received from my fans over the years. Working on SpongeBob and other projects has been an absolute joy, and it's all because of the people who watch and enjoy what I do. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You guys rock.
About your haters?
Well, you can't please everyone, right? There will always be people who don't like what you do, and that's just part of the deal. I just focus on doing my best and having fun with what I do. Haters gonna hate, but as long as I have the support of my fans, I'm good.
What if you get an opportunity to work with The Rock?
Oh, that would be incredible. The Rock is such a talented and entertaining guy. It would be an honor to work with him. I can already imagine all the fun we could have on set, maybe even get into a bit of a friendly competition, like who can do the silliest voice or who can come up with the funniest joke. It would definitely be a blast.
You and Kevin Hart.
Oh, me and Kevin Hart. Now that would be a fun duo. We could have plenty of comedic moments for sure, and we'd definitely keep each other laughing during filming. Plus, it would be a great opportunity for some classic buddy movie antics, like getting into trouble and causing chaos everywhere we go.
Is that SpongeBob laugh the Hart you voice the most?
Ah, the classic SpongeBob laugh. Always a joy to voice. Over the years, I've probably done it 100 times at least, but honestly, I never get tired of it. It's just such a fun and satisfying laugh to do. And every time SpongeBob gets excited or happy in an episode, it makes me happy too.
What was your childhood?
Oh, my childhood was pretty typical, I guess. Growing up in Syracuse, New York, I had the usual mix of school, friends, and family. I loved playing outside with my friends, and we'd spend hours coming up with silly stories and games. I also got into acting and comedy at a young age, which was always a passion of mine. Even though my childhood was fairly ordinary, those early experiences really shaped me into who I am today.
When did you start acting?
Well, I started acting in school plays and local theater productions when I was in high school. I really enjoyed being on stage and making people laugh or cry with my performance. After that, I went to college and continued to pursue acting, taking classes and participating in student films and productions. So I'd say I really got started in my teens and have been doing it ever since.
Do you have a favorite computer game?
I do have a favorite computer game, actually. I'm a big fan of video games, especially the Mario series, but my all-time favorite game is probably The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I've played it so many times, and it never gets old. The story, the characters, the whole world is just so immersive and engaging. Plus, the soundtrack is phenomenal. I could listen to it for hours.
You're the voice actor for Ice King, right?
That's right. I've had the privilege of playing the role of Ice King on Adventure Time for quite some time now. It's been a lot of fun bringing that character to life with all his quirks and eccentricities.
The mayor on Powerpuff Girls.
That's correct. I also had the pleasure of playing the role of the mayor in the Powerpuff Girls. It was a great opportunity to work on such a beloved show and to bring a character with such a complex personality to life.
The narrator from SpongeBob.
Correct. Alongside my regular role on SpongeBob as the voices of various characters, I also have the honor of being the narrator for the show. It's been a blast bringing the narrator's unique voice and perspective to life, especially since he always has some witty commentary to add to the episodes.
Why is your favorite the narrator?
I have a soft spot for the narrator because I find the character's dry humor and witty commentary absolutely hilarious. Plus, being the voice of the narrator allows me to be a part of all the action in SpongeBob's world, which is always a blast. It's also great to be able to add that extra layer of humor and sarcasm to the episodes, and I enjoy the challenge of making even the smallest lines interesting and engaging for the audience.
Gary the Snail.
That's right, I also had the pleasure of voicing the adorable snail, Gary. Gary is such a beloved character in SpongeBob, and I had a lot of fun bringing him to life with his goofy and lovable personality. Being able to make SpongeBob's pet snail come alive with my voice was a real treat.
Even Patchy the Pirate.
Yes, I also voiced the character of Patchy the Pirate on SpongeBob. He's a fun character to play with his ridiculous pirate persona and his obsession with SpongeBob. It's always entertaining to switch gears from regular characters to a character like Patches, who has such a distinct and over-the-top personality. Plus, it's fun to play a character who's a bit of a bumbling fool, but still lovable in his own way.
Why Patchy the Pirate never meets SpongeBob?
Well, that's a good question. The way I see it, it's actually part of the joke that Patchy and SpongeBob never meet. It's like they inhabit different worlds, and that's what makes their relationship so hilarious and endearing. It adds to the absurdity of the show that this pirate guy is so fixated on SpongeBob, yet they've never actually met in person. Plus, it allows for all those funny moments where Patch is desperately trying to connect with SpongeBob, but something always gets in the way or goes wrong.
Cat Dog, you play as Dog?
Yes, I did play the role of Dog on Cat Dog. Dog was a fun character to portray with his mischievous and carefree personality. He was always getting into trouble with his brother Cat, and it was my job to bring his cheeky and humorous side to life with my voice. It was also interesting to play a character who was permanently attached to another character, Cat 24/7 in the show, which added an extra layer of complexity to the role.
Shaolin Showdown, Raimundo Pedrosa, Grandmaster Dashi, Lad, Clofange, Hannibal Roy Bean.
Yes, that's correct. In the series Shaolin Showdown, I voiced several characters, including the main character, Raimundo Pedrosa, as well as the Grandmaster Dashi, Vlad, Clofang, and Hannibal Roy Bean. It was a lot of fun playing these different characters, each with their own unique personalities and quirks.
Word Girl, Two Brains.
Yes, that's right! In the animated series Word Girl, I played the role of Dr. Two Brains. This villain was particularly interesting to play because of his split personality. His obsession with cheese and his quirky mannerisms made for a fun and challenging character to voice.
Johnny Bravo, is this correct?
Yes, definitely correct. I had the pleasure of voicing the character Johnny Bravo in the animated series of the same name. Johnny was a hilarious character who was both vain and dumb, yet somehow still charming. It was a lot of fun making him come to life and bringing his overconfident personality to life through my voice.
You play as Dilbert.
absolutely correct. For those who may not know, I had the pleasure of voicing the character Dilbert in the animated series of the same name based on the popular comic strip. Dilbert was a sarcastic and cynical character who always seemed to find himself in ridiculous situations. It was a lot of fun to voice his sarcastic and pessimistic personality, especially when he interacted with his colorful coworkers and boss.
Squanchy and Gene and Rick and Morty.
You got it! I had the pleasure of voicing two characters in the popular animated series Rick and Morty, Squanchy and Gene. Both characters were a lot of fun to play and had distinct personalities and tics that were enjoyable to bring to life with my voice. Squanchy was a fun-loving and laid-back character who was always ready for a good time, while Gene was more of a sarcastic smartass who had no filter and said whatever was on his mind.
Do you have a favorite moment with your real-life best friend, Bill Fagerbakke?
Oh, I have so many great memories with my friend Bill Fagerbakke. We've been friends for over 20 years now, and we've had so many laughs and good times together. One of my favorite moments was when we were both working on SpongeBob at the same time. We would spend hours in the studio together, just cracking up over the silly scripts and having a blast voicing our characters. It was seriously some of the best times of my life.
How did you meet Bill Fagerbakke?
Well, we actually met on the set of SpongeBob when we were both just starting out in voice acting. We were both nervous and excited about working on this new show, and we hit it off right away. We had great chemistry and could make each other laugh without even trying. From then on, we just sort of became best friends and have stayed close ever since.
What's your thoughts about Roger Bumpass?
Oh, I love Roger Bumpass. He's such a great guy and an incredible voice actor. He's been doing this for such a long time, and his skills are just unreal. Plus, he's so funny and fun to hang out with. We've worked together on so many projects over the years, and I always look forward to working with him.
Do you have a favorite moment with Roger Bumpass?
There are so many hilarious moments that come to mind when thinking about working with Roger Bumpass. But one that stands out to me is a time when we were doing some voiceovers for an episode of SpongeBob, and we were just cracking up so hard that we almost couldn't get through the lines. Just the two of us in the booth laughing uncontrollably while trying to get through the scene. It was one of those moments that makes voice acting so much fun.
What about Clancy Brown?
Yeah, that's right! Clancy Brown is a true legend in the world of acting and voice acting. He has this incredible ability to completely embody his characters, and his voice is just so distinct and commanding. You can always recognize his voice no matter what character he's playing. Working with him has been a privilege, and his performance as Mr. Krabs is just iconic.
What was the funniest moment with Bob Joles?
Oh man, Bob Joles is a riot. We had so many funny moments working together, but one that stands out to me is when we were recording for the episode of SpongeBob Doing Time. There's a scene where we were just ad-libbing lines and cracking up, laughing almost uncontrollably. It was impossible to keep a straight face, and we just kept feeding off each other's laughter and getting even more into goof-off mode. We actually got scolded by the director for giggling too much and not getting the lines right.
Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. You play as Wheelie Skids.
That's right, I had the honor of playing Wheelie and Skids in the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. These characters were fun to play, with their distinct personalities and quirks. Playing Wheelie with his high-pitched voice and fast talking was certainly a challenge, but I enjoyed bringing his sassy and confident personality to life. And Skids with his sarcastic and sardonic humor was a fun character to portray as well.
What was your reaction working with Megan Fox?
Well, working with Megan Fox was definitely an experience. She's such a talented actress, and we had a great time working together on Transformers. She has a very natural and down-to-earth personality, but when it came time to get serious and focus on the work, she was all business. It was impressive to see her dedication and professionalism. Plus, she's gorgeous, so that didn't hurt either.
What was the funniest moment you have with Peter Cullen?
Oh man, working with Peter Cullen on Transformers was truly an honor. He's such an iconic voice actor, and his performance as Optimus Prime is just flawless. He brings so much depth and emotion to the character, and it was an absolute blast working with him. As for the funniest moment, it would have to be during one of our recording sessions. Peter and I were just goofing off, doing impressions and cracking up at each other's jokes. It was absolute mayhem in the studio, but it was so much fun.
What was the hardest scene with Frank Welker?
Working with Frank Welker is always a pleasure. He's so talented and versatile, and his ability to bring any character to life is just unparalleled. But the hardest scene I had with him was probably in Transformers, when we had to record a fight scene between Megatron and Optimus Prime. It was physically exhausting, having to yell and grunt and deliver dramatic dialogue all in one take.
He was in Paradise PD, you play Chief Randall Crawford.
That's right! I had a blast playing Chief Randall Crawford in Paradise PD. He's such a ridiculous cartoon character, and the show is just bonkers. It was a lot of fun to play a character who was such a over-the-top, no-nonsense cop.
You have funny moment with Cedric Yarbrough.
Working with Cedric Yarbrough was a riot. He's such a funny and talented actor, and we just had a blast together. We spent half the time just cracking each other up trying to do the voices, but there was one moment that still stands out to me. We were doing one scene where we were trying to arrest a suspect, and it just devolved into us ad-libbing and cracking up. We just couldn't keep a straight face. It was ridiculous.
What was the hardest scene, David Herman?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've worked with David Herman on a few occasions, and he's always so on point. But I'd say the hardest scene was probably in an episode of Paradise PD, where we were both playing multiple characters in a fast-paced scene. It was really tricky to switch between the different voices and characters while still maintaining the flow of the scene. But we managed to pull it off, and it turned out to be pretty hilarious.
You was in Rocco's Modern Life play as Heifer Wolf.
That's right. Heifer Wolf was actually one of my favorite characters to voice. He's such a fun, carefree character with a big heart, and it was a pleasure bringing him to life. I had so much fun working on Rocco's Modern Life and the movie.
What's the funniest scene with Mr. Lawrence Filbert?
Oh, that's a tough one. Mr. Lawrence is such a talented actor, and our scenes together were always a blast. But there was one scene in particular that cracks me up every time I think back to it. We were doing a scene where Filbert and Rocco were trying to get away from a sea urchin, and we just could not stop laughing through the whole thing. We were literally rolling on the floor by the end of it.
What the hardest scene with Joe Murray?
Well, working with Joe Murray was a real treat. He's such a talented animator and director, and his vision for Rocco's Modern Life was just incredible. But the hardest scene for me was probably the scene where Rocco was trying to juggle while riding a unicycle. It took us so many takes to get the timing and the physicality of it just right, and it was just mentally and physically exhausting to keep getting it right, but the final result was worth it, and the scene ended up being hilarious.
You was in Clarence, you play as Sumo.
That's right! I had a great time playing Sumo in Clarence. He's such a goofy and endearing character, and I just love his carefree attitude. It was a lot of fun to bring him to life, and I had a blast working on the show.
With the funniest scene with Sean Giambrone?
Working with Sean Giambrone was a joy. He's a talented and versatile actor, and we had so many funny moments together. But if I had to pick one scene in particular, it would be the one where Sumo and Clarence were trying to impress a group of girls by doing a backflip on a trampoline. We just couldn't stop laughing, and it took us so many takes to get through the scene without cracking up. It was a blast!
What the hardest scene with Grace Kaufman?
Working with Grace Kaufman was great. She's such a talented actress and was so easy to work with. But there was one scene in particular that was particularly challenging. It was a scene where Sumo and Clarence were trying to build a treehouse and kept running into all sorts of problems, and it required a lot of physical comedy and comedy timing. It took us a few tries to get it just right, but it was definitely worth it in the end and ended up being one of my favorite scenes in the show.
You was in Brickleberry, you play as Woodrow Johnson.
That's right, I played the character of Woodrow Johnson in Brickleberry. He was a fun character to voice with his quirky personality and his love for nature. I remember having a blast working on the show, and it was great to be part of such a hilarious and raunchy series.
What was the funniest moment with Tara Strong?
Working with Tara Strong was a total blast. She's so talented and has such a great sense of humor. But the funniest moment has to be this one time when we were doing a scene together and we just couldn't stop breaking the fourth wall and cracking each other up. It was a total train wreck, and we just couldn't keep a straight face. We were rolling on the floor with laughter, and it took us like 10 takes to finally get through it with a straight face.
What the hardest scene with Daryl Finney?
Daryl Finney was such a fun person to work with, but there was one scene in particular that was really challenging. It was a scene where Woodrow, Malloy, and Denzel were all trying to do a song and dance number, and it was just a comedy of errors. We just couldn't seem to get the timing right, and we kept cracking up and ruining takes. It was just a hilarious train wreck, and it took us a few hours just to get the scene right.
You was in Handy Manny, you play as Mr. Lopart.
That's right, I had the pleasure of voicing Mr. Lopart in Handy Manny. It was a lot of fun to bring this quirky character to life, and I had a great time working on the show. The character was a fun and eccentric boss, and it was fun to play around with his personality and quirks.
What your thoughts working with Wilmer Valderrama?
Working with Wilmer Valderrama was a real pleasure. He's such a talented actor and a really down-to-earth person. He was always professional and easy to work with, and I enjoyed every minute of it. We made a great team and played off each other well.
With the funniest scene with Lance Bass.
Oh man, working with Lance Bass was a blast. He's such a funny guy, and we had so many great moments together, but the funniest scene had to be the one where we were just improvising and riffing on each other. We just kept feeding each other lines and trying to crack each other up, and it turned into a complete mess. We both couldn't stop laughing, and we had to take a few minutes to compose ourselves before we could continue. It was just classic.
What the hardest scene with Carlos Alazraqui.
Working with Carlos Alazraqui was a real honor. He's such a talented comedian and actor. But one scene we struggled with was the one where we were trying to do a really fast-paced scene with a lot of quick cuts. It was just really hard to get the timing just right and maintain that pace throughout the scene. We had to do lots of takes before we got it just right, but it was worth it in the end.
He was in Camp Lazlo. You play as Lumpus.
Lumpus was such a fun character to play. He's so over the top and eccentric, and he just brings so much silliness to the show. It was a blast working on the show, and every time I got to play Lumpus, it was like stepping into another world. He was definitely one of the most fun characters I've ever voiced.
What was the funniest moment with Carlos Alazraqui?
There were so many funny moments working with Carlos Alazraqui, but one that always sticks out in my mind is the time we were messing around with the voice for Lumpus. We were doing these ridiculous voices and accents and just trying to find the right one for him, and we just couldn't stop cracking up. It was a total circus, and it took us a while to get back on track, but it was totally worth it. Lumpus's voice ended up being perfect, and Alazraqui's performance was spot on.
What the hardest scene with Jeff Bennett?
Working with Jeff Bennett was always a blast, but if I had to pick the hardest scene, it would probably be the one where we were doing a scene with a bunch of animal characters. It was a challenge to keep track of all the different voices and make sure they all sounded distinct and unique, but the end result was worth it. The scene was hilarious, and it showed off our comedic talents really well.
He was in Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. You play as Eduardo.
Playing Eduardo was a blast. He was such a funny and quirky character, not to mention the fact that his voice was just so much fun to do. Plus, the show was just so well written and well executed. It was a great experience working on the show, and I'm super proud of my performance.
What's the funniest moment with Tom Kane?
Tom Kane is a real character, isn't he? Whenever we worked together, there was always a lot of laughter and fun involved. But there was one moment that sticks out in my mind as the funniest. We were doing some improvisation, and we just kept feeding off each other and getting into this ridiculous spiral of jokes and puns. We had to take a few minutes to get ourselves together before we could continue, but it was absolutely worth it. I've never laughed so hard in my life.
What was the hardest scene with Kevin Michael Richardson?
Working with Kevin Michael Richardson was a great experience. He's such a talented actor and always brought so much energy to the characters he played. But there was one scene that really challenged us, and it was a scene where we had to do some really fast-paced dialogue and keep up with the quick back and forth. It was a bit of a tongue twister, but we managed to get through it, and the end result was hilarious.
You was in the Boondocks. You play as yourself.
Playing myself in the Boondocks was a bit of an odd experience, but a lot of fun. It was interesting to bring my own personality to life in animated form, and I have to admit that it was pretty hilarious to see myself on the show. I'm just glad they didn't make me look too much like a fool.
What was the funniest moment with Charlie Murphy?
Working with Charlie Murphy was a real treat. He was such a funny guy and always brought so much energy to the scenes we did together. But the funniest moment had to be the time we were just goofing off and making up jokes on the spot. We had the whole cast and crew in stitches, and it was just pure chaos in the best way possible. I'll never forget that day.
What the hardest scene with Cedric Yarbrough?
Well, working with Cedric Yarbrough is always a pleasure. He's such a talented actor and has so much charisma. But if I had to pick one scene that was particularly difficult, it would probably be the one where we were doing a really complex chase sequence. It required a lot of energy and physicality, and it took a lot of takes to get it just right. But in the end, it was totally worth it, and we ended up with a scene that was action-packed and hilarious.
He was in Wander Over Yonder. You play as Commander Peepers.
Playing Commander Peepers was a total blast. His over-the-top personality and quirky demeanor made every line a joy to record. The writers really gave me a lot to work with, and I had a lot lot of fun bringing him to life. I also really loved working with the rest of the cast and crew. They were all so talented, and we had a great time collaborating.
What the hardest scene with Keith Ferguson?
Working with Keith Ferguson was a real highlight. He's such a talented actor and always brings so much depth and emotion to his characters. But there was one scene that was particularly challenging for us. It was a scene where we were doing a lot of physical comedy and had to coordinate our movements and timing really well. It took a lot of takes to get it right, but it was totally worth it in the end. The scene ended up being one of my favorites.
What the funniest moment with Fred Tatasciore?
Working with Fred Tatasciore is always a blast. He's such a talented and funny actor, and I love every scene we do together. The funniest moment we had was probably the time we were doing a scene with some really ridiculous dialogue. We just kept cracking each other up and couldn't keep it together. It took us a few takes to get through the scene without cracking up, but it was totally worth it. The final result was absolutely hilarious.
You was in Dexter's Laboratory. You play as Val Hallen.
Oh man, Val Hallen was such a fun character to play. His over-the-top personality and his love for heavy metal made every line a joy to record. And the fact that he was a superhero made it even better. I had a lot of fun bringing him to life, and I still get a kick out of hearing him whenever I watch the show.
What the funniest moment with Christine Cavanaugh?
Working with Christine Cavanaugh was such a pleasure. She was so talented and funny, and we always had a great time together. The funniest moment we had together was probably the time we were doing a scene where we were just playing around and improvising. We kept feeding off each other's jokes and humor, and it was just pure chaos. We had the whole crew cracking up, and it was just a total blast.
What your thought works with Deron Norris?
Working with Deron Norris was a true pleasure. He's so talented and brings so much energy to every character he plays. The whole experience was just great, and we had a ton of fun working together. The funniest moment we had together was probably the time we were doing a scene with a lot of physical comedy. We were just goofing off and trying to crack each other up, and the whole crew was laughing like crazy. We had several takes where we couldn't even get through a single line.
What the hardest scene with Kat Cressida?
Working with Kat Cressida was awesome, but there was one scene that was particularly difficult. We were doing a scene where we had to get really emotional and dramatic, and it took a lot of takes to get it just right. It was a really demanding scene, but we were both up to the challenge, and in the end, we ended up with a scene that was truly moving.
You was in Talking Tom and Friends. You play as Hank.
Playing Hank was a blast. His sarcastic and snarky personality is always fun to play around with, and the banter between him and the other characters makes for some really funny moments. Plus, the fact that he's a cat just adds to the fun. It's always hilarious watching him interact with the other characters in the show. Overall, it was just a pleasure bringing him to life, and I can't wait to see where the show goes next.
What the funniest moment with Colin Hanks?
Working with Colin Hanks was a real delight. He has such great comedic timing and is just a joy to work with. The funniest moment we had together was probably the time we were doing a scene with lots of physical comedy, and it got to the point where we couldn't keep a straight face. We kept cracking each other up, and the whole crew was laughing like crazy. Took us a few takes to get through the scene, but it was worth it. The final result was absolutely hilarious.
What the hardest scene with James Adomian?
Working with James Adomian was an absolute blast. He's so talented, and his characters are just so much fun. But there was one scene that was particularly challenging. It was a really complicated scene with a lot of different elements and multiple characters. It took us a while to get it just right, but it was worth it. The final result was a high-energy scene that was truly hilarious.
You was in My Gym Partner's a Monkey. You play as Jake.
Playing Jake was a real treat. His sarcastic nature is always fun to play with, and he's got such a fun personality. Plus, his interactions with the other characters are hilarious, and watching him interact with the other characters was a blast. Overall, it was just a pleasure bringing him to life, and I couldn't be more proud of how he turned out.
What was the funniest scene with Maurice LaMarche?
Working with Maurice LaMarche was a total pleasure. He's such a talented and funny guy, and he's always got a quick wit and a great sense of humor. The funniest moment we had together was probably the time we were doing a scene with a lot of quick-witted banter. We were just feeding off each other, and it was just hilarious. We had the whole crew cracking up, and it was just pure comedy gold.
What the hardest scene with Rick Gomez?
That's a tough question, but if I had to pick the hardest scene with Rick Gomez, it would probably be the one where we were doing a long-winded scene with a lot of dialogue. It was a real challenge to navigate, but Rick was up to the task, and we ended up with a scene that was both emotionally powerful and satisfying.
You was in Winnie the Pooh. You play as Rabbit.
Playing Rabbit was a total blast. His uptight and high-strung personality is just so much fun to play with, and his interactions with the other characters are hilarious. Plus, his obsession with his rabbit hole is just too much. It was a real highlight of my career, bringing him to life and making his personality come through.
What your thought on working on Jim Cummings?
Jim Cummings is such a legend. Working with him was an honor and a pleasure. He's so talented, and he's just got this incredible ability to bring his characters to life. His voice is so distinctive and memorable, and he's just so easy to work with. He's an absolute pro, and it was truly a joy to be able to work with him on Winnie the Pooh.
What the funniest scene with Jack Boulder?
Working with Jack was a blast. His sense of humor is just so natural, and his timing is impeccable. The funniest scene we had together, I think, was when we were doing a scene with some really ridiculous characters. We were both cracking up and just feeding off each other's jokes, and it was just a total blast. The whole cast and crew were laughing right along with us, and it was just one of those moments that you never forget.
What the hardest scene with Robert Lopez?
Working with Robert Lopez was a real honor. He's a true musical genius, and his ability to create catchy and memorable tunes is just uncanny. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one where we were doing a big, complex song and dance number. It took a lot of coordination and hard work, but we pulled it off, and the end result was truly amazing.
It was in Futurama. You play yourself.
It's always fun to make a cameo on a show as amazing as Futurama, and it was a real kick to play myself on the show. It was the 1999 episode Bendin' in the Wind, and they had my character kidnapped by the evil Professor Farnsworth. It was great to work with the rest of the cast on that episode, and the whole experience was just a blast.
With the funniest scene with John DiMaggio.
John DiMaggio is just hilarious. His comedic timing is impeccable, and he's just got such a great sense of humor. The funniest scene we had together in Futurama was probably the time we were doing a scene where we were both playing robots who were pretending to be humans. And we were just cracking each other up, and then the whole cast and crew were watching us and laughing along with us. We even got some of the voice actors from The Simpsons who didn't have any lines in that episode to crack up with us.
What the hardest scene with Billy West?
Working with Billy is always a pleasure. His talent and versatility are truly remarkable, and he's just one of the most talented and versatile voice actors I've ever worked with. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one where we were doing a really fast-paced scene with lots of back and forth dialogue. It took a lot of takes to get it just right, but the end result was worth it, and the scene really shone.
You was in Mr. Show with Bob and David. You played as yourself.
Playing myself on the show, Mr. Show with Bob and David, was a real treat and a real honor. It was a surreal experience to not only be on the show, but to also play myself. My character didn't have any lines, but it was still a blast to be a part of the show. It was a great experience to work with the cast and crew of the show, and I look back on that experience with a lot of fond memories.
How feel working with Jack Black?
Working with Jack Black was a blast. He's such a fun and energetic person, and his sense of humor is truly unique. It was a pleasure to bring his character to life for the brief few minutes of screen time that he had in the show. I also love his music career, both with Tenacious D and with other groups.
What the funniest scene with John Ennis?
Working with John Ennis was a blast. He's got such a great sense of timing, and he's just a natural comedian. One of the funniest scenes we had together was probably the one where we were doing a scene in prison. It was just a silly scene, and we were both just improvising and feeding each other jokes. We had the whole crew cracking up, and we even got some other cast members into the scene, and they started cracking up too.
What was the hardest scene with Scott Aukerman?
Working with Scott was a true pleasure. His directing skills are exceptional, and his sense of humor is truly unparalleled. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with all the characters from the sketch show, Mr. Show with Bob and David, running around trying to get stuff done. It took a lot of energy and focus to keep everything moving without stopping, but In the end, it was worth it, and the scene really shined.
You was in Sky High. You play as Mr. Timmerman.
Playing Mr. Timmerman in the movie Sky High was a real blast. His grumpy personality and his dislike of teenage superheroes were a real challenge to bring to life, but I really enjoyed the experience of playing such a unique character. It was also really fun to work with such a talented cast of actors, and the whole project was a real success.
What the funniest scene with Nicholas Braun?
Playing with Nicholas Braun was such a joy. He's such a great actor, and his ability to bring life to any character he plays is just amazing. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one in the movie Sky High, where our characters were in class and trying to do a presentation. We were just cracking each other up, and the whole crew was laughing right along with us. It was just pure chaos, but it was so much fun.
What the hardest scene with Malika Hack?
Working with Malika was a true pleasure. She's so talented, and her energy is just contagious. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one where we were doing a scene with a lot of physical activity. It was physically taxing to keep up with all the action, but it was worth it in the end, and the final product was truly impressive.
You was in Uncle Grandpa. You play as Dennis.
Playing Dennis in the show Uncle Grandpa was such a joy, especially because he's such a fun and silly character. His over-the-top personality and his love for fun and adventure were really fun to bring to life, and my interactions with other characters were always a blast. It was a real pleasure to be a part of such a fun and wacky show, and I have a lot of fond memories of working on it.
What the funniest scene with Peter Braungart?
Working with Peter was an absolute joy. He's such a funny and unique person, and his sense of humor is just brilliant. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where we had a big fight against a band of robots. It was just pure chaos, and we were both just dying of laughter the whole time. It took a lot of takes to get it just right, but it was worth it in the end, and the final product was truly hilarious.
What the horse scene with Adam Devine?
Working with Adam was a total pleasure. He's such a talented actor, and his ability to bring any character he plays to life is really incredible. And the hardest scene we had together was probably the one with all the characters from the show Uncle Grandpa battling an army of robots. It took a lot of focus and effort to get everything just right, but in the end, it was all worth it. The scene was intense and action-packed, and it was just a blast to be a part of.
Transformers Dark of the Moon. You play as Wheelie.
Playing Wheelie in the movie Transformers Dark of the Moon was an amazing experience, especially because he's such a beloved character for both old and new fans. His quirky personality and his love for making jokes were really fun to bring to life, and it was truly a pleasure to bring him to life. It was also a real honor to work on such a beloved IP, and the opportunity to work with such a talented team was truly a privilege.
What the funniest scene with Patrick Dempsey?
Working with Patrick was an incredible experience. He's such a talented and hardworking actor, and he always brings so much energy and charisma to his performances. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where our characters were bantering back and forth. His quick wit and his ability to keep up with my jokes was truly impressive, and we just had so much fun working together. It was truly a pleasure to be a part of such a successful project.
What the hardest scene with Alan Tudyk?
Working with Alan was such a blessing. He's such a talented and skilled voice actor, and his ability to bring any character to life is truly remarkable. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with all the characters coming together to fight against the Decepticons. It was a really action-packed scene, and it took a lot of focus and coordination to get it just right, but we were able to pull it off, and the final product was really amazing.
It was in Johnny Test. You play yourself.
Playing myself on the show Johnny Test was a true honor and a pleasure, especially because it was such a popular and beloved show for kids. My character didn't have any lines, but it was a real treat to be a part of such a fun and adventurous show. Working with the cast and crew was an absolute blast, and I have fond memories of working on the show.
What the funniest moment with James Arnold Taylor?
Working with James was such a blast. He's such a talented and energetic person, and he brings so much life to his characters. The funniest moment we had together was probably the time we were doing a silly scene. His quick wit and his willingness to just roll with anything I threw at him was really impressive, and we just had so much fun working together. It was a real pleasure to work with such a talented actor, and I have so many fond memories of working with him on various projects.
What the hardest scene with Ian James Corlett and Trevor Duvall?
Working with Ian and Trevor was a true pleasure. They're both so talented, and their chemistry is just amazing. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole cast and crew coming together to put put on a big show. It took a lot of effort and coordination to get it all just right, but it was totally worth it in the end.
You was in Shakes the Clown. You play as Binky the Clown.
Playing Binky was a complete blast. He's such a fun and unique character, and he has so much personality. His interactions with other characters are just so hilarious, and he just brings so much fun to the show. Working with Bobcat Goldthwait and the rest of the cast was an absolute pleasure, and I have so many fond memories of working on the film.
What's the funniest scene with Bobcat Goldthwait?
Working with Bobcat was such a delight, so funny and unpredictable, and he's just a total blast to work with. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where we were trying to put on a show and everything just went wrong. He has such a knack for physical comedy, and the scene was absolutely hilarious. We both just had so much fun working on it, and it was truly a pleasure to bring that scene to life.
What the hardest scene with Robin Williams?
Working with Robin was an absolute honor and a privilege. He's such a talented and iconic actor, and he truly brought so much to the role. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one where we were doing a long and emotional scene. It was emotionally taxing, and it took a lot of focus and energy to get it just right, but in the end, it was totally worth it. Having the opportunity to work with such a legendary actor is something I'll always be grateful for.
You was in the Superhero Squad show, Iron Man, Tony Stark, MODOK.
Playing Tony Stark and MODOK on the Superhero Squad show was a true treat. Playing such iconic characters was really cool, and they're both so fun to bring to life. Having great co-stars like Michael Dorn and Mark Hamill made it even better, and we had so much fun recording our lines together. It was really a pleasure to be part of such a fun and action-packed show.
How did you feel work with Robert Englund?
Working with Robert was a true treat. He's such a talented and iconic actor, and he brings so much life to any role he plays. He had a really distinct voice, and it was so fun to bring to life. His energy and his willingness to just go with anything I threw at him made the whole process a total blast. It was an absolute pleasure to work with such a legendary actor, and it was truly an experience I will never forget.
What the funniest scene with Robert Englund?
Working with Robert was such a blast. He's such a funny guy, and he has so many funny stories. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where the gang was just doing a really silly dance. He was completely into it, and he just let loose, and it was absolutely hysterical. We had to do a lot of takes to get it just right, but it was totally worth it in the end. I highly recommend rewatching it. The scene is hilarious.
What the hardest scene with Jim Cummings?
Working with Jim was an absolute delight. He's such a talented and versatile actor, and he brings so much to every character he plays. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole cast was just doing a crazy chase scene. It was a really long and involved scene, and it was pretty exhausting, but in the end, it was totally worth it.
You was in 8 Crazy Nights. You play a sharper image projector.
Playing the Shaper image projector in 8 Crazy Nights was a true joy. My character was so strange and over the top, and it was so much fun to bring to life. Plus, having the iconic Adam Sandler there made it even more fun, and we just had a blast working together. It was a pleasure to be a part of such a funny and heartwarming movie.
What the funniest scene with Adam Sandler?
Working with Adam was such a treat. He's such a funny guy, and he brings so much energy to every scene. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where we were just having a silly conversation. He's got a real knack for comedy, and he just keeps coming up with great comebacks, and the scene was absolutely hilarious. We had a blast working on it, and it was truly a pleasure to be part of such a hilarious and memorable scene.
What the hardest scene in with Blake Clark?
Working with Blake was a real pleasure. He's such a talented and experienced actor, and his comedic timing is spot on. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the over-the-top slapstick humor, and it was definitely a challenge to maintain that energy throughout the whole scene. But in the end, it was worth it. We both brought our A game to the scene, and it was a total blast.
You was in Batman the Brave and the Bold. You play as Plastic Man.
Playing Plastic Man was a total blast. He's such a unique and wacky character, and he was so much fun to bring to life. He looked like that of a real comic book come to life, and the animation team did such a great job of bringing him to life. It was a pleasure to be a part of such an iconic show.
What the funniest scene with Diedrich Bader?
Working with Diedrich was a blast. He's such a talented and fun actor, and he brought so much energy to the character of Batman. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one where we were just doing a bunch of quick one-liners. He has a really great sense of humor, and he just kept coming up with great jokes, and we had a blast working on it together.
What the hardest scene with Tom Everett, Scott?
Working with Tom was a pleasure. He's such a talented and hardworking actor, and he really helped bring the character of Blue Beetle to life. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with all the action and special effects. It was a particularly challenging scene, but we were able to get it just right in the end. I really enjoyed working with Tom, and I think the episode came out great.
Did you enjoy film? The SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants?
The SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants was a lot of fun to work on. It was great to see SpongeBob and his friends on the big screen. The animation was wonderful, and working with all the original cast and crew was a real treat. It was great to see all the characters in a different setting, and I think the movie was a great success. The fact that it was so well received was just the cherry on top, and I'm proud to have been a part of it.
You was in Puppy Dog Pals, you play as ARF.
Playing ARF in the show Puppy Dog Pals was a real treat. He's such a fun and energetic character, and he was great to bring to life. He's a robot dog created by Bob, Raleigh, Bingo, and Hissy. He is used for communication, and he is loyal to Bob and always tries to help him and Raleigh. He has several robotic dog features, and he has the characteristics of a German Shepherd, including brown fur, a black snout, floppy ears, and a long, fluffy tail.
With the funniest scene with Sam Lavanino and Harlan Williams and Isaac Ryan Brown?
Playing with Sam, Harlan, and Isak was so much fun. They're all such talented and funny people, and they really brought the characters to life. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one with the gang trying to cook up a special surprise for Bob. Sam is a really talented voice actor, Harlan is one of the funniest people around, and Isak was great at playing the straight man. We just had a great time recording the scene together, and I think it was truly hilarious.
What the hardest scene with Tara Strong?
Playing with Tara was a real pleasure. She's such a talented and accomplished voice actress, and she always brings so much to any character she plays. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one when she was pretending to be sick. It was a really difficult scene to get right, but she was a total pro and she just killed it. She really captured the character's mannerisms, and voice perfectly, and it was truly impressive to watch.
You was the Fairly Odd Parents. You play as Cupid.
Playing Cupid was an absolute blast. He's such a classic character, and he was a lot of fun to bring to life. He is one of the lesser-known fairies, and he loves his job as the god of love. He is very romantic, and he enjoys making other people fall in love. He has a bow and arrow for weapons and can shoot arrows that will make people fall in love when they hit them. He's a mischievous character, and he loves to cause trouble. Bringing him to life was truly a treat, and I'm sure fans of the show will fall in love with him.
What was your reaction? Working with Butch Hartman and Darren Norris and Suzanne Blakesley and Cheryl Hines.
Working with Butch Hartman, Duran Norris, Suzanne Blakesley, and Cheryl Hines was a real treat. They're all such talented and experienced performers. I'm a huge fan of Duran, so getting to work with him was a real pleasure. The funniest moment was probably the time we were doing a scene with all the fairies. We were just really getting into the characters and cracking each other up, and it was a blast.
What the hardest scene with Eric Bauza?
Working with Eric was a dream come true. He's such a talented and experienced voice actor, and it was a pleasure to bring him onto the show. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with Timmy and the gang in outer space. It was a really complicated scene to get right, but we were able to get it spot on. I really admire his work, and I think he's one of the best voice actors in the business.
You was in Mission Hill. You play as Wally.
Playing Wally was a blast. He's such a quirky and unique character, and he's always good for a laugh. He's Tim's lazy, sarcastic, and irresponsible roommate, and he's a bit of a slacker. He'll often spend days lounging around the apartment and playing video games, but he's also a bit of a ladies' man, and he's quick with the one-liners. Bringing him to life was a total blast, and I'm sure fans of the show will love getting to know him.
What the funniest scene with Scott Menville?
Working with Scott was a treat. He's so much fun to work with, and he really brings a lot of energy to the character. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole gang at the beach. We were just having a blast, especially Scott. The guy is so goofy. He really knows how to keep the mood going. We had a blast filming this, and I think the scene came out great.
What the hardest scene with Nick Jameson?
Working with Nick was a treat. He's a great actor, and he always brings a lot of life to every character he plays. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole gang trying to help Tim with his love life. It was a really complicated scene, and we had to get it just right, but in the end, it was worth it. I really admire his work, and I think he's one of the most talented voice actors out there.
You was in Hotel Transylvania. You play as additional voices.
Working on Hotel Transylvania was an absolute blast. Playing all those minor characters was a total treat and a ton of fun. It was really fun to play around with different voices and personalities, and I really let loose on those characters. The animators did such a great job with the animation, and bringing those characters to life was truly a treat.
What the funniest scene with Chris Parnell?
Filming with Chris was such a blast. He's such a talented and hilarious actor, and he really brings a lot of energy to the character. The funniest scene we had together was probably the time we were doing a scene with all the monsters in the hotel. We were just having a blast, especially Chris. The guy is a riot. He really knows how to create funny scenes. We had a great time filming it, and I think fans will love the scene.
What the hardest scene with Adam Sandler and Andy Samberg and David Spade?
Working with Adam Sandler, Andy Samberg, and David Spade was a real pleasure. They're all such great actors, and it was a treat to share the stage with them. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole gang at the hotel. It was great to see how they interacted with each other. We really worked together to make the scene as good as it could be, and I think we nailed it in the end.
You was in Samurai Jack. You play as yourself.
Playing myself on Samurai Jack was such a unique experience. Playing a version of myself in a cartoon was really cool, and it was definitely a first. The idea to have myself as a character in the show was really well executed, and the animators did an amazing job bringing me to life. It was a real treat to see myself in such a cool show, and I'm sure fans were happy to see a familiar face.
What the funniest scene with Jeff Bennett?
Working with Jeff was a blast. He's such a talented and versatile actor, and he really brings life to his characters. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one with all the characters in the middle of a battle. We had to really nail the timing and the delivery, but in the end, it was great. I had a blast working with Jeff, and I'm sure fans will love the dynamic between our characters.
What the hardest scene with Phil Lamar and Mako and Kevin Michael Richardson?
Working with Phil, Mako, and Kevin was a real treat. They're all such talented and experienced voice actors. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with the big battle sequence. It was a big and action-packed scene, and it took a lot of practice to get the timing and delivery just right. We didn't have many retakes, but in the end, it turned out great, and I think the scene really shines.
You was in KIF. You played as Trevor.
Playing Trevor was a total blast. He's such a fun and dynamic character, and he was a joy to bring to life. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with a very intense and emotional scene. It was challenging to convey the emotions of the scene and get the timing just right, but we were able to really get into the moment, and it was a great scene. I had a lot of fun playing Trevor, and I think fans will get a kick out of him.
What the funniest scene with James Monroe Eagleheart?
Working with James was a real pleasure. He's such a dynamic and energetic actor, and he really brings a lot of life to his characters. The funniest scene we had together was probably the one with the whole gang in a really funny and wacky situation. There were a lot of jokes and banter, and James really knows how to bring the laughs. We had a blast filming it, and I think the scene is truly hysterical.
What the hardest scene with Vela Love?
Working with Vela was a total blast. She's such a talented and hardworking actress, and she really brings life to her characters. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with a major plot twist. It was a real emotional ride, and the scene really required us to amp up the emotion. We had a lot of practice and really got into the moment, and I think the scene really paid off.
Did you enjoy film on Plankton the movie, Netflix?
Working on Plankton the movie was such a great experience. It was awesome to see a movie centered around such a beloved character, and the animation was absolutely gorgeous. I had a lot of fun playing a small role in the movie, and I think the final result is a masterpiece and a true fan favorite.
What the funniest moment with Mr. Lawrence's?
Working with Mr. Lawrence was a complete joy. He's such a talented and experienced voice actor, and he really brings life to Plankton. The funniest moment we had together was probably the one with Plankton doing a presentation. We had a lot of fun creating the moment, and I think the scene is truly hilarious and sure to make fans laugh.
What the hardest scene with your wife, Jill Talley?
Playing with Jill was a real pleasure. She's my wife, and she's such a talented and dynamic actress. The hardest scene we had together was probably the one with a big and epic battle sequence. It was hard to get the timing and the delivery just right, but we were able to get the scene just perfect in the the end. And I think the scene is really great and a fan favorite.
That's the end of the interview. You can say whatever you want.
Thanks for the interview. It was a pleasure. I want to give a huge thanks to my fans for their support, and I hope to keep bringing joy to them through my work. You all mean the world to me. I want to keep doing great cartoons for you, and please follow me on my social media, Instagram, Real Tom Kenny, Twitter, Real Tom Kenny.